Select Committee inquiry into the government's management of the Powerhouse Museum and other museums and cultural projects in New South Wales.
It doesn't feel like the first hearing.
Sorry, the first rehashed hearing.
Okay.
The inquiry is examining issues surrounding the proposed relocation of the Powerhouse Museum and government support for the state's museums and cultural sector more broadly. Before I commence, I would like to acknowledge the Gadigal people, who are the traditional custodians of this land. I would also like to pay respect to the elders past and present of the Eora Nation and extend that respect to other Aboriginals present. Today is the first of several hearings we plan to hold for this inquiry. This morning we will hear from the government witnesses from the arts portfolio, including the Honourable Don Harwin MLC, Minister for Public Service and Employee Relations, Aboriginal Affairs and the Arts. In the afternoon session we will hear from the witnesses from the local government, including the Lord Mayor of Sydney, as well as peak bodies and professional associations in the museums, galleries and cultural heritage sector. Before we commence, I would like to make some brief comments about the procedures for today's hearing. Today's hearing is being broadcast live via the Parliament's website. A transcript of today's hearing will be placed on the committee's website when it becomes available. In accordance with broadcasting guidelines, media representatives are reminded that they must take responsibility for what they publish about the committee's proceedings. It is important to remember that parliamentary privilege does not apply to what witnesses may say outside of their evidence at the hearing. And so I urge witnesses to be careful about any comments you may make to the media or others after you complete your evidence, as such comments would not be protected by parliamentary privilege if another person decided to take an action for defamation. The guidelines for broadcast proceedings are available from the Secretariat. All witnesses have a right to procedural fairness according to the Procedural Fairness Resolution adopted by the House in 2018. There may be some questions about that a witness could only answer if they had more time or with certain documents to hand. In those circumstances, witnesses are advised that they can take the question on notice and provide an answer within 21 days. I remind everyone here today that the committee hearings are not intended to provide a forum for people to make adverse reflections about others under the protection of parliamentary privilege. I therefore request witnesses to focus on the issues raised by the inquiry terms of reference and avoid naming individuals unnecessarily. Witnesses are advised that any messages should be delivered to the committee members through the committee staff. To aid the audibility of this hearing, may I remind both committee members and witnesses to speak into the microphones. The room is fitted with induction loops compatible with hearing aid systems that have telecoil receivers. In addition, several seats have been reserved near loudspeakers for persons in the public gallery who are having hearing difficulties, although I don't see anyone in the public gallery today. All witnesses from departments, statutory bodies or corporations will be sworn prior to giving evidence. Minister, I remind you that you do not need to be sworn, as you have already sworn an oath to your office as a Member of Parliament. Who have we got here? Mr. Draper. Okay. For all other witnesses, I ask that you each in turn state your full name, position, title and agency. Swear either an oath or an affirmation. The words of both the oath and the affirmation are on the cards on the table in front of you. And I'll begin with you, Mr. Draper, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Simon Kevin Draper. I'm the Chief Executive of Infrastructure.
Maybe pull that mic a little bit closer, please. Yeah.
Apologies.
You're a long way away.
Yep. Simon Kevin Draper. I'm the Chief Executive of Infrastructure New South Wales. I solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. Ms. Foy?
Thank you. I, Catherine Foy, Deputy Secretary, Community Engagement, Department of Premier and Cabinet, solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Minister, would you like to make an opening statement?
Thank you, Chair, and I'd like to start by thanking you for the opportunity to appear this morning and would like to make a few remarks across the broad terms of references, as well as obviously the core projects which your committee is concentrating on. Our government's commitment to bringing to the arts and cultural funding in the state is without recent precedent. We're absolutely committed to a once-in-a-generation investment in our cultural infrastructure. And when people think about where to go in Australia for arts and culture, I want them to be thinking about New South Wales. A particular focus, of course, is the Powerhouse project, and already I would, of course, remind the committee that already the Powerhouse is operating on 3 sites, including the Powerhouse Ultimo, the Museum Discovery Centre at Castle Hill, and also the Sydney Observatory. We're absolutely committed to establishing an iconic, vibrant, interactive, world-class cultural institution in Parramatta to further grow and promote an accessible and diverse arts and cultural environment across Western Sydney. Powerhouse Parramatta will be the first New South Wales Government state cultural institution to be located in Western Sydney. It will be the flagship museum of the Museum of Applied Arts and Sciences at 30,000 square metres with 18,000 square metres of exhibition and public spaces. It will be the largest museum in New South Wales and the leading science and technology museum in the Southern Hemisphere. Western Sydney is Australia's 4th largest economy and one of the fastest growing and most cultural diverse regions in Australia. Its population is projected to grow by 3% per annum to 2041, over double the rate of Greater Sydney and nearly triple the national rate over the same period. The New South Wales Government's recently released 2040 Economic Blueprint recognises the role creative industries play in creating vibrant, dynamic places that attract, develop and retain economic talent in New South Wales and help drive economic growth. The opportunity for the Powerhouse Parramatta to harness this growth to contribute to the productivity and livability of Western Sydney, Greater Sydney and New South Wales more broadly is transformational. The exhibitions will be supported by a cross-generational education program that will set a new benchmark in cultural participation by the growing communities of Western Sydney. In August 2019, the New South Wales Government endorsed this vision, design and operational principles for Parramatta Powerhouse. This vision has driven the design competition process, design development and operational planning of Powerhouse Parramatta and marks a significant uplift to service levels for the benefit of the communities of Greater Sydney and New South Wales. On July the 4th, I was absolutely delighted to announce with the Treasurer that the New South Wales Government is committed to keeping the Powerhouse Museum at Ultimo open. It's a decision I'm sure that the committee is going to welcome. The decision to retain and renew the Powerhouse Ultimo, in addition to establishing the new flagship Powerhouse Parramatta, will allow us to provide 2 world-class museums for the communities of New South Wales and significantly increase access to and exhibition of the museum's internationally renowned collections. Powerhouse Ultimo will be Australia's leading museum of design and innovation. Its home in the Ultimo Power Station will provide the context to tell the stories of the age of industrialisation, and its ongoing impacts will continue to shape our world. The iconic Powerhouse objects, the Bolton and Watt engine, Locomotive No. 1 and the Catalina flying boat frame periods of extraordinary innovation and creativity that influenced design, architecture, fashion and visual communication. A key driver of Powerhouse Ultimo is supporting the continued productivity of the New South Wales creative economy, which has been significantly impacted by COVID-19. Plans for the site will support jobs in the creative and cultural sectors with the creation of a cultural and creative industries ecology at its core, while ensuring the site contributes to a vibrant, active and connected place. Over and above the Powerhouse, the New South Wales Government is custodian and manager on behalf of the people of New South Wales of large and diverse Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal collections with local, national and international significance. In addition to creating new cultural infrastructure, this government has also set about revitalising some of our unique cultural icons. The New South Wales State Cultural Institutions manage significant cultural heritage collections and provide services and programs throughout the state. The state cultural institutions are custodians of 29 million collection items valued at $4.5 billion. In addition, the New South Wales State Archives and Records Authority manages a collection of over 14 million items valued at nearly $1 billion. In New South Wales, in 2018-2019, almost 7 million people visited the state cultural institutions. Together, these institutions provide a unique and irreplaceable archive of our history and contemporary culture. The government is undertaking large-scale projects to extend the quality and access to these important assets for the community. At the Australian Museum, the government has committed $50.5 million to Project Discover, the Australian Museum Stage 1 redevelopment. Combined with a $7 million contribution from the museum, this funding is repurposing existing storage space within the museum to create a new, flexible 1,500 square metre touring exhibition hall and to provide dedicated educational and retail experiences. Kane Constructions has been contracted to build Project Discover, and construction is progressing very well with anticipated completion later this year. The Art Gallery of New South Wales expansion, the Sydney Modern Project, will deliver an outstanding global art gallery for New South Wales. The government has provided $244 million, which, together with over $100 million in donations from Art Gallery of New South Wales benefactors, is supporting this significant expansion. Construction is well underway on this project, which will serve generations of New South Wales interstate and international artists and visitors. The project is on track to be delivered within budget by 2022, with the gallery remaining open during construction. The New South Wales Government is also proud to be supporting the iconic Sydney Opera House and is proud to be investing $228 million in its renewal project. The Sydney Living Museums has also just completed a major renewal of the UNESCO World Heritage listed Hyde Park Barracks Museum, which reopened to the public on February 21st to much acclaim. While the Powerhouse program is a significant part of this inquiry, I welcome the additional focus it has on the regions. The government is also committed to areas outside of Sydney, and I might say that I'm now particularly focused on the regions, given that I've had to move back to them just recently. But anyway, we'll leave that alone. Regional museums are of great importance in the regions as they provide cultural experiences, opportunities for volunteering, and the collections underpin and shape local stories and identities. As Minister, I'm absolutely determined to ensure that regional New South Wales gets its fair share of arts and cultural funding. In 2018, the $100 million Regional Cultural Fund supported 136 projects, 42 million of which was allocated to 42 museums and art museums, or as we often call them in Australia, art galleries. In closing, I'm proud of the New South Wales Government's decision to build an iconic, fit-for-purpose museum in Western Sydney that will be recognised around the world. I'm proud of our government's record cultural infrastructure spend, particularly in these challenging times when the state needs economic stimulus. 2 world-class museums in Parramatta and Ultimo will provide a significant boost for the cultural and tourism sectors in New South Wales. What a great outcome for New South Wales.
I'll do. Thank you. Questions?
Minister, in reference to your opening statement where you said that you're now going to have 2 museums,
Yep.
Western Sydney and Ultimo, what is the new cost, the new price tag? $1.5 billion was the previous price tag hanging off the project. What is the budget now?
Mr. Secord, just because you repeat and others repeat the $1.5 billion figure over and over and over and
1.6.
again, it doesn't make it true, and the facts don't change. The fact is that the cost of the project has never been $1.5 billion, and certainly in total, never. And certainly the total government contribution has never been anywhere near $1.5 billion. In fact, it's always been well below that. When the project received its approval to proceed at the end of 2019, I made it very clear that the net contribution of the taxpayer would be $645 million. On July the 4th this year, the Treasurer and I announced that there was going to be a change to that figure simply because we are now keeping the powerhouse at Ultimo. So therefore, a previous position that the government had, which was to require the sale of some land in part of the powerhouse precinct at Ultimo, was no longer operable, and that the government would be making an additional contribution on behalf of the taxpayers of $195 million.
Was that the...
Therefore, if I may finish, David, I won't be long. Therefore, the total cost, the net cost of to the taxpayer of the Parramatta Powerhouse project is $840 million.
Minister, was $190 million...
195, David, I think is the
was
figure.
$195 million the
yeah.
assumed revenue from the Ultimo site, from the initial Ultimo Creative Industries Precinct strategic business case?
Yes, that was the target that was set for us. It was expected that we would try and work with that site, such as to achieve a $195 million contribution to the cost of the Parramatta project.
All right.
That no longer is the case. That is specifically what has changed as a result of keeping the Powerhouse Museum at Ultimo. That is no longer a consideration that needs to be taken into account in terms of also proceeding with the Powerhouse project at Parramatta.
Minister, on April the 18th, 2018, your office provided a report to the Daily Telegraph, saying that in fact it would cost $500 million to refurbish the Powerhouse Museum at the Ultimo site if the move to Parramatta did not occur. How does that factor into the costs? If you're saying on April the 18th, 2018, that it would cost $500 million, and I refer to the article by Anna Caldwell, April the 18th, 2018, where it says it'll cost $500 million on top of everything to bring the Ultimo site up to scratch.
I'm familiar with the article you're referring to.
You provided it.
The article that you're referring to was focusing on the 2014 final business case produced by the Powerhouse Museum and endorsed by the trustees of the Powerhouse Museum on what, in their opinion, and in the opinion of the staff at the time and the experts they had working for them, would be the cost of, they in fact put the net cost with following also the net cost at $350 million, and I think it was assumed by the journalist that in current dollars it would be the higher figure. Now, so that's, as I understand it, the basis of that figure in the Daily Telegraph article.
So
now, obviously, since we are retaining the Powerhouse Museum at Ultimo, we do need to look at what it's going to cost to keep that museum open. That stands to reason. Now, let's be quite clear. There has been in place work being done on an Ultimo final business case for some time, which has been, in fact, since it was authorised back prior to the last election in 2018, just after I became the minister. You'll recall, Walt, that prior to my becoming minister, the position was that there would be no continuing cultural presence at Ultimo. When I became the minister, I was absolutely determined that I would keep a cultural presence at Ultimo, and that is why I have consistently said, ever since the announcement that the Premier and I made from recollection, April 2018, my staff, yes, that is the right date, since April 2018, that the Ultimo Power Station would remain as cultural space, and that we would be investigating a continued presence of the Museum and Applied Arts and Sciences in that building with the Fashion Museum and other possible cultural uses, right? What has happened now, because that work isn't finished on that final business case, what has happened now is that we've given a preferred option for the cultural uses, and that cultural uses is our commitment to keep the Powerhouse Museum at Ultimo. So the work on the business case will conclude by also looking at what needs that site has so that it can be a world-class museum.
Minister, you've talked about a business case. Now, you said that this is your figures, and the figure I quoted was 1.5.
Excuse me.
The figure I quoted of
Sorry,
1.5 billion.
Apologies.
So the figure that I quoted of 1.5, I was referring to the findings and deliberation of this committee, and my colleague, the Honourable David Shoebridge, reminds me that it's 1.6. Now, billion. Now you're claiming.
Well, that's the total cost, not the net. The minister's been talking about net.
The minister now says that it's going to be $840 million to retain and to do the net, to do the Parramatta site. Now you're talking about a business case. So this
Ultimo.
840
Ultimo, the 840 figure is for Parramatta.
is for Parramatta. So what will be the cost to retain the Ultimo site, taking into consideration the 2004 report that said it would cost $500 million?
2014 report, I think you're referring to.
2014 report that would cost $500 million to. So $840 million for the Parramatta site. What is the cost now to retain the Ultimo site?
Well, of course, there's no cost with retaining the Ultimo site because the Ultimo site is in public ownership.
You're telling me $0.
I'm saying there is no cost in keeping it. In terms of what work gets done on making sure that it's is going into the future a world-class museum, that work is being done right now in the context of the final business case for Ultimo.
The trustees of the Powerhouse Museum put the figure at somewhere between $350 and $500 million to bring that site up to a standard that they, as trustees of the museum, considered acceptable. Now, you've said that's their figure, so what is your figure? What is your government's
I'm sorry,
figure?
may I just go back and I will deal with that and just correct the record slightly. $840 million is in fact the cost for Parramatta and the work that's being done at the museum's Discovery Centre at Castle Hill. Okay.
So the 840 is for
840 is for
Parramatta
Parramatta and Castle Hill, yes.
So what is the cost for Ultimo? You're telling me $0. I do not believe you, Minister.
If I may,
Minister,
I would
come
like
on.
to go back to Rose's question and give, since I didn't answer it, and at least give her the courtesy of an answer. Now, Rose, that final business case that was done in 2014, it's important that we understand what all of the elements of that were. It involved the demolition of the RAN building, the demolition of the Harwood building, and a whole series of elements that might not be actually what we can consider 6 years on is the best use of that site. In fact, the trustees at that time were not only wanting to demolish the Harwood building, they were wanting to dispose of the Harwood building. If you've read the 2014 final business case, it's all in there. So please, let's be fair about this. I would encourage the opposition members to remember if they're talking about that's what the trustees said was the cost, they should be honest and say the trustees at that time wanted to demolish the Rand building and wanted to quite radically reconfigure the existing museum. Now, if they're going to quote those figures, please understand what they're actually
Well, you give us an alternative figure. So you're saying that might or might not be the plan moving forward, but that's all we have because you haven't provided any alternative figures as to what the cost might be.
I've come to you and I've said that those costings are being worked out as part of the final business
When will we
case
get the
for
final
Ultimo.
business case? When will that be available?
The third iteration of the final business case.
Yeah. It's expected the work will be finished this year.
Minister, could I just take you through, so as we just clear the record, just simply go through the numbers. So as I understand it now, the net cost to the taxpayers for the Parramatta building and the changes at the Discovery Centre, that net cost is now $840 million. Is that right?
Correct.
Right. And it's gone up from $645 million because you've had to add in the additional $195 million, which was money you thought you would gain from the sale or development of the Ultimo site. Is that right? That's what we were taught.
Well, yes, the $195 million was the target that was set for the project by the Expenditure Review Committee.
Now, I know you've critiqued the $1.5 billion figure, which was the total cost of the project. You've told us what the net cost of the project will be. What is the total cost of the project, estimated cost of the project for the Parramatta and Discovery Centre sites?
Well, we can't give you a definitive cost on that for one very important reason, and that is until we actually procure the company that will build the Powerhouse Parramatta, we won't have a final cost. And it has always been the policy of the government not to say this is what we expect it to put in the public domain, this is what we estimate it will cost, because that puts the taxpayer at a competitive disadvantage when it's dealing with the construction companies who'll be bidding for the work.
Well, Minister, I'm confused because if you don't know what the cost of building the project is, how can you tell us what the net cost to government will be of the project if you don't actually know what the cost of building the project will be?
There's no reason to be confused, David, because if you've just listened to what I said, we do have a figure that we're working to, but when it is the policy, and I'll invite Mr. Draper to comment on this in a minute, because I'm sure he will want to explain exactly why this is. The policy of Infrastructure New South Wales is not to put the figure that we're working to out in the public domain, because it will put the taxpayer at a disadvantage in the tender process for procurement of a construction company.
I'll allow Mr. Draper to give further detail in one sec, but I'll put this to you, Minister. You critique the analysis that says this project is going to cost in the order of $1.5 or $1.6 billion, but you won't put in the public record what the actual cost of the project is, and you say for confidentiality and bargaining reasons.
Well, how about
do you see how your criticism of the 1.5
hear the answer
do you see how your criticism of the $1.5 billion project doesn't hold water despite the non-member for
I invite
Ballina?
Mr. Draper to make some comments.
Thank you, Minister. And yes, on your point about disclosing detailed cost plans for building projects, I think it is wise for the government to not put that into the public realm when we're likely to go into a tender process, and we've discussed that before in other committees, Mr. Shoebridge and Mr. Borzak. I think perhaps the best guide I can give you is in 2018 we did publish a summary of the business case. It's on our website, the Infrastructure New South Wales website, and there's a table on page 8 of that, which gives a breakdown of the 3 options that were considered, and that
I'm well familiar with that, Mr. Draper.
and it gives a construction cost estimate of $640 million in 2018 dollars net present value terms at that time, and we are still working completely within the budget that was set in that business case.
But that business case, I think, had a net return of 1.02, was it?
That's correct.
So if you take out the $195 million that you were going to get from the Ultimo site, what is the current net return? How negative is it now?
Well, as the Minister said, there's another business case going to be done that will review the decision that was undertaken in retaining Ultimo. And so in the course of doing that business case, there'll be an estimate of the benefit cost ratio arising from that.
But Mr. Draper, from the only available evidence you've got of a business case, it was wafer thin, like 1.02 positive. And that was on the assumption, correct me if I'm wrong, that you were going to get $195 million from the Ultimo site. That's now taken off the table.
Well,
this must be a project that has a negative rating.
No,
if
not
you do it now.
I understand.
Must be.
I understand why you'd say that, Mr. Shoebridge. But what we'll have to do is consider the benefits that arise from retaining the Ultimo site. So, there was an expectation of some financial returns from the Ultimo site, but in retaining the Ultimo site, we'll also have to consider the benefits to the community of retaining that site, and they do get quantified and included in the business case as well.
Minister, from day one, we've had answers like that, rubbery figure after rubbery figure after rubbery figure, trying to justify a disastrous financial and political decision that the Premier and this government made to relocate it. And we're now going to get another rubbery figure business case to try and strap up a disastrous financial decision, aren't we? That's what's happening again.
Look, I just completely reject that characterisation of what's happening. I am absolutely excited about the vision that we have for the Museum of Applied Arts and Sciences Trust. They are going to be the custodians of 2 of the great museums in the world. We are going to do what we can to ensure that Ultimo is improved to be a world-class museum. That is the commitment that the Treasurer made on July the 4th, and I'm already absolutely thrilled with the work that's being done on ensuring that the Sydney Basin's second city, Parramatta, has a world-class cultural institution. I think that the people of Sydney and New South Wales are going to be absolutely thrilled with the result at both Ultimo and Parramatta. And that's how I see it. And I am not going to be distracted from delivering what I think are going to be 2 excellent projects.
Not going to be distracted by annoying things like telling people how much it's going to cost, coming up with some robust business case that don't get reworked every 6 months to deal with the political changes. They're the kinds of things that aren't going to distract you, Minister.
Have taken the decision to keep Ultimo, David?
I'm saying you should not have taken the initial disastrous decision and then tried to justify it with rubbery figure after rubbery figure like you're doing now.
I understand what you're saying.
You're headed down the wrong path.
This was a decision that was announced by Premier Baird, almost 3 years before the Premier became the Premier, and almost 3 years before I became the Arts Minister. I am proud of the contribution that I have made since I became Arts Minister, ensuring that we have 2 great museums that are going to serve the people of Sydney
But Minister, you weren't going to have 2
very
museums.
well into the future.
Minister, you weren't going to have 2 museums. You were going to have 1 until the 4th of July. What caused the change of heart
I think
and now has made you so proud to have 2 museums?
I think I addressed that earlier. I said that my approach ever since I became Minister in 2017 was to ensure that there remained a cultural presence in the Ultimo Power Station, and that in the Ultimo final business case, a continuing presence for the Museum of Applied Arts and Sciences would be assessed. And I'm delighted to say that it won't just be the fashion museum that I might thought it would be. It's the museum staying at Ultimo.
And Minister, can you, if I understood from your opening, you said that the museum at Ultimo will retain an age of industrialisation exhibition place and focus. Does that mean you will guarantee the Bolton Watt will stay, the Catalina will stay, and the number 1 locomotive will stay? Will you give that guarantee?
That's the intention.
Will you give that guarantee?
Yes.
Will the Bolton and Watt engine actually be fired up with live steam like it was before?
I'm sorry, I'll just have to take that question on notice, Robert. I haven't been
thank you.
briefed on that issue.
Minister, back to the $840 million that you referred to for the Castle Hill Parramatta site. Where does the $100 million for the Riverside Theatres fit into that? Is that in addition to it, is that part of the...
No, absolutely not. That it's not in addition to it. It's part of the purchase price, the land purchase price.
Right.
And that $100 million has been paid to Parramatta City Council, and they're in receipt of it.
Now, the $840 million that you're referring to, that so the $100 million, according to you, has already been paid.
It's actually $140 million.
140,
actually, I'm sorry.
Right.
I was using your figure, but it's $140 million, yeah.
So that is in addition to the 840 so far?
I'm sorry?
So that is in addition to the 840?
No, I've said quite clearly that's included in the 840.
So can you take us through, just so we get this in our minds, okay, so Ultimo, you won't say what the figure will be. Mr. Draper, I'm not asking you to reveal it, but do you have a figure for the cost of the Ultimo site?
No, we don't have we don't know what the scope of works would be at the Ultimo site. That's something that has to be explored in the business case. So I guess there's a range of possible outcomes at the Ultimo site, from continuing to operate it in its current form, and it's been operating since 1988, so that's a possibility, through to a major redevelopment, and I think the business case will have to examine a number of options there. Okay. So we haven't got a cost, Mr. Wilson.
Okay, so you don't have a cost for the Ultimo site. You maintain it's $840 for the Parramatta Castle Hill site, plus $100 million and $140 million for Riverside.
No.
Walt,
I've answered this twice already. There's no confusion, and there should be no confusion given that I've already answered that twice, which is the $140 million price for the land.
Yep.
Is part of the $840 million net contribution the taxpayer is making to the Parramatta process, and it has already been paid to Parramatta Council.
So what is the completion? What is the new completion date for the Parramatta? You referred to it in your opening statement as the Powerhouse Parramatta. Is that its new name? Is that the name of the project now?
It's the working name, if I can put it that
so
way.
Okay.
A final decision on the name hasn't been taken. But that's the working name.
Okay, the working name. So.
Now, to your question, which is the completion
I'm just trying to
date.
get it into sequence. So I'd like to know how much for.
Now, do you want the answer to
Ultimo? I'll make it clear.
Yep.
Powerhouse Ultimo, Powerhouse Parramatta, Powerhouse Castle Hill, Riverside Theatre. So I just want to know the 4 pots of money that the taxpayers are paying for. What is the sum total?
So not the completion date.
And then I will ask about the completion date.
So you want to know the land purchase price. You want to know the net cost of the land purchase price, building the museum at Parramatta, and building the Castle Hill Museum Discovery Centre. Is that your question?
I think everyone in the community wants to know what is going to be the cost of Powerhouse Ultimo, Powerhouse Parramatta, Powerhouse Castle Hill, and Riverside Theatre. It's just that the taxpayers are footing the bill, and they have a right to know. This is dragged on now for it's coming up to 10 years. Well,
No, it isn't.
Well,
Anyway.
is the completion date been pushed back? Because that's when
It's not even vaguely coming near it, Rose. You know that. It's only 5
What is the
years
new
since the announcement was made by Mark Beard.
Up to 10.
So what is the new completion date if it's not?
So you don't
Okay.
want the answer on the
I want
Can I
many
just have one
answers.
question at a time, Walt?
Minister,
I'm
you have the
perfectly
floor.
happy to look.
Minister, you have the
had
floor.
4 months away. I'm perfectly happy to sit here and answer questions, as
Minister-
many as you want. But
Minister,
please, it's
okay.
best if you only ask one at a time.
Okay, the 4 pots of money. I want to know Ultimo. So Powerhouse Ultimo, Powerhouse Parramatta, Powerhouse Castle Hill, Riverside Theatres. So 4
For
pots
the
of money.
third time, I'll give give answers that I've already given and which are exactly the same as answers I've previously given today. The total cost of the land purchase price for Parramatta, for the museum at Parramatta and the Castle Hill Discovery Centre is the net cost to the taxpayer is $840 million.
Thank you. You've answered one. Now, Powerhouse Ultimo.
Well, the total cost of the final business case for Ultimo is $5 million.
For the business case.
Yes.
You must have an indication of what the cost will be.
No, I don't.
You don't.
Sorry, you said the total cost for the business case is five.
That's right. The cost of preparing the business
preparing
case.
the business case is $5 million.
The final business case. And that's, at the moment, the work that's being done to look at the scope of the new project, which may result, following the decision to retain the Powerhouse Museum at Ultimo.
But Minister, for there to be a business case, to actually be costing something, there must be a proposal. That's right, isn't it? There must be an actual proposal for there to be a business case.
A business case will always look at options.
but
What there are options.
Oh,
well, what are the options?
How many
that are
options?
being? You can have your go. What are the options that are being considered in that business case? This isn't the state secret, I assume. This is about the future of the Ultimo site. So what are the options?
So I'll deal with that at a high level, and if there are additional questions, you can obviously follow up on them, and I'll, as best as I can at this early stage since the announcement, try to answer them for you. But basically, what the final business case will need to look at are a couple of things. First of all, they will need to look at the current museum and see, because well-intentioned, positive suggestions have been made by people who are well and truly across these issues about how that museum can be improved in terms of circulation through the museum and in terms of what are perhaps a little unfairly described as the dead areas in the museum. I mean, obviously this is a museum that's been retrofitted into a heritage power station, so I mean it's different. It was a great design feat doing that retrofit.
Award-winning.
But indeed, if you're doing a museum on a greenfield site, you'd do it differently to the museum we've got there. I think everyone concedes that. And so obviously those sorts of issues in terms of the museum functioning better, which were, by the way, also the focus of the 2014 final business case, they need to be looked at. Secondly, there will be issues in terms of the storage facility at Harwood, and the role of the Museum Discovery Centre and what the relationship between those two projects should be. So they will need to focus on whether the storage facility in the Harwood building can achieve everything that an integrated storage facility at the Museum Discovery Centre at Castle Hill can achieve, adopting the same benchmarks in terms of collection storage and workplace safety and other considerations. Thirdly, please let me finish.
All right.
Please let me finish. Thirdly, they will need to consider the role of the museum in that precinct, right, and the place-making capacities of that precinct, which are incredibly important in terms of driving future visitation to the Powerhouse at Ultimo. So effectively, they will need to be the three broad issues that the final business case at Ultimo focuses on.
So one is, what, if any, remodelling of the Sulman Award-winning building and the heritage buildings that form the sort of main part of the Powerhouse?
Yes, so that it functions, because, well, as you know, in the 2014 final business case, which was adopted by the trustees.
We should just never call any of them the final business case, I think, Minister, but the 2014 business case.
That final business case describes the Ultimo Powerhouse Museum as not fit for purpose, right? So obviously that whole issue has to be looked at and evaluated.
All right. So
Re-evaluated, I should say, before a final decision is made in terms of this project going forward.
Well, I'll try and break this down, and then I want to come back to one aspect about that. Then there's the Harwood building.
Yes.
And is one of the options being considered, if I'm trying to decode what you said, the closure and sale of the Harwood building, or the use of the Harwood building for a non-museum commercial purpose?
There's no need to decode it. It's very simple. It's obviously the Harwood building was built. Was designed in the mid 80s, built in the mid to late 80s, and has a couple of drawbacks, which are that it's not as possible it's not possible at all for the public to look at the collection in non-museum conditions in the same way they are at the Museum Discovery Centre. And it's always been a strong objective of this project that we increase the access that the public have to the renowned collection of the Trust. So that's an issue. There are also some, I don't want to, go right through the drawbacks of the Harwood as a storage facility, but there are issues that have to be considered, but they'll be worked through. Now, I think it's important that we consider how the precinct can, as a placemaking strategy, how the precinct can be a vibrant precinct that will increase patronage at the museum. So the final business case will look at the future of the Harwood building, as it must.
So, Minister, I asked a pretty, I thought, fairly straightforward question. Is part of the business case looking at the potential yields from the sale or commercial utilisation of the Harwood building or the space where the Harwood building is? Is that part of the business case?
The business case will certainly look at the precinct and how it can achieve more in terms of the creative industries and in terms of driving visitation to the Powerhouse Museum.
All right. Well, I think I've given you an opportunity to address that directly. I'm going to assume from that, unless you tell me otherwise,
David,
that
yes.
the sale and activisation through sale of the Harwood site is part of the business.
Well, there is no plan to sell the Harwood building if that's where you're going. There is no plan to sell the Harwood building, but obviously in terms of making sure that we get the best result for the Powerhouse Museum at Ultimo, we've got to look at all the options. A final business case has to do that. And it's been looked at before and actually advocated by the Trust and the Trust staff in the 2014 business case.
Are all the options that are going into the business case, will they all have been approved by the Trust? Will have they been signed off by the Trust? And if not, what role of the Trust and what role of the public in having feedback upon the future of the Powerhouse?
I'll just
Surely we've
take
learned
some
that that's
advice on
important.
that.
Consult with it, but this is ultimately a government business case. Consultation.
Yeah,
The
okay.
project governance has them on it, chairing it.
Look, the project committee is co-chaired by the President of the Board of Trustees, Barney Glover. So there is consultation and involvement with the Trust in the preparation of the final business case.
All right. Well, we'll probably explore that later with the trustees. Did you want to?
Yep. Minister, I want to take you back to the July 4th announcement itself. So that was your first public appearance after
Correct.
being reinstated as the minister.
Correct.
When did you become the minister? When were you sworn in?
At 4 o'clock on July the 3rd.
4 o'clock on July the 3rd. When was the decision to retain the Ultimo site made?
401.
No, it's a serious. I'd like to hear the answer. So you were sworn in July the 3rd, 4 p.m.
Look,
How long have you been
obviously
in the work?
the announcement, the decision to make the announcement on Saturday, July the 4th, was made prior to me being sworn back in as the minister
It was
on
the
July
intention
the
to have the
3rd.
Treasurer and the Premier there because you weren't the Minister and the Premier was acting. Was that the intention? And then she was subbed
Look,
out and subbed in?
to be perfectly honest, I can't really answer that question.
So you get signed in at 4 p.m. and it's like, by the way, you're turning up tomorrow with the Treasurer at Powerhouse Ultimo to make this announcement.
Pretty
and you
much.
were just completely like, wow, that's
Pretty much.
come out of the blue.
Well, it was a good start, man. A good reheating.
That's what we're
I think
meant
it was
to
a good-
believe.
All I can
Wow.
I think
That's
most people thought it was
amazing.
a good reheating.
For my first day back on the job.
The truth is sometimes stranger than fiction, Rose.
We
they
are
say.
meant to believe that. That there was no pre-planning or involvement
That isn't what he
from
said.
you that's gone into that. We can't ask you about that at all. You weren't involved in that.
Rose, I can honestly say that I was not involved in any discussions about reopening Ultimo, but I was absolutely thrilled to be told about them when I was sworn back in. It had been my, as I've explained to the committee earlier in the morning, my long-held objective to retain a Museum of Applied Arts and Sciences presence at Ultimo, and I was delighted that that was the outcome, and I really wasn't interested in, frankly, what had preceded that prior to me being sworn back in. It was the outcome that matters, and I couldn't be happier, and I'm now totally focused on making sure that, once again, Ultimo is a world-class museum.
I'm taking from what you've suggested that you weren't out of the ministry for that long. So prior to you being stood down, you'd been privately advocating for the
didn't
outcome.
get stood down.
Apologies, what language would I... That you stood aside?
I'm
not trying to make a
voluntarily resigned.
Prior to your
and
voluntary
I can
resignation.
Okay, yep.
Prior to your voluntary resignation, you had been privately advocating for the outcome that was announced on July 4. You voluntarily resigned. In that relatively
Rose,
short period,
Yep.
that decision is made. You're not consulted. You're not told. You're reinstated to the ministry and then told that less than 24 hours later, you will be standing up next to the Treasurer and making that announcement.
That's what he says.
Rose, there is a Santa Claus. There is a Santa Claus.
Minister,
Okay.
Minister,
Just accept it. It was a good.
what discuss,
It's fantastic.
when was the board, when were the trustees advised of the new position?
I'd have to take that question
Well,
on notice.
Ms. Foy, you were involved in the creative infrastructure Premier's department. When was the board advised of the new position?
I'm not a member of the board, nor did I have communication with the board.
Mr. Draper, were you involved in that decision? Do you have any knowledge of that?
In the decision or the communication?
The
to
communication to the board?
No, I didn't have any.
What
knowledge
about
of
the
that.
Just ask
decision?
Professor Glover.
I'd like to ask Ms. Foy about the decision because obviously we share the Minister's absolute delight
Professor
that
Dodge and Weave.
facility will be retained at Ultimo, but he's indicated that he wasn't involved in that decision. So can you enlighten us at all as to who was involved in that decision and what led to this change of policy that was announced on
I asked
July
that
4th?
question 20 minutes
I'm
ago.
afraid I have probably about the same response as the Minister, which is these decisions are taken by government. They don't necessarily involve a range of people, so I became aware of it around the day before.
So on the day before on the Friday,
On the Friday.
the same day as the Minister?
What caused it was a citizen revolt, Rose. That's what caused it. That's what caused it. Not any action of government. A citizen revolt caused this, didn't it, Minister? It wasn't an assessment. There was no report. It was just like the people of New South Wales think it stinks to knock over the powerhouse. And that's
No,
what
I don't
caused
think
the
it's
turn.
that simple.
Well, tell me what else. You don't
Well-
have any other explanation.
Can I just have a minute? I just need to check one thing with a member of my staff. It's not as easy with social distancing.
No, I
as it
understand.
normally
Fair
is.
enough, fair enough.
Maybe you could shout. So we can hear it.
Look, I don't think I can really help you beyond that.
No. Well,
Sorry,
in the
because
absence
I
of
just
any...
literally wasn't party
Yeah.
to any of the
But Minister-
discussions prior to July the 3rd.
There was no fresh business case. There was no further report. There was no detailed memorandum. It was a political decision taken because there was that citizens' revolt about the demolition of the powerhouse.
As I just
and
said,
I'm
I
glad
don't
of the
think-
decision, but that's the answer, isn't it?
Look, I can't say that was. I suggest you, if you really want the answer, that then you'll have to raise it with some of my cabinet colleagues who were involved in it. I can't give you the answer, and I
Did you
can't
ask when
consult.
you were told of the announcement? So the phone rings, it's 4:05, you're standing up tomorrow with the Treasurer. This is the announcement that's being made. Did you say
Heritage properties.
why?
Look, Rose, when you're the arts minister and you're getting a great decision like that out of the government, you never look a gift horse in the mouth.
Exactly.
You just
I'm not-
accept it, you
I'm
take
not
it as a win,
suggesting
and you
that
move
you should
on.
have challenged
and-
it, but perhaps you might have inquired.
Oh, Rose, I mean, really?
Minister,
It doesn't
now
seem
that,
unreasonable.
I'm sure you've got better questions
Now that
to
you've got
ask.
your-
I just
yes,
want to ask.
Chair.
Oh, apologies, Chair. I just wanted to ask one more specific question, but it can wait.
no, I'm going to turn the committee's mind to the destruction of heritage property at Parramatta.
Oh, right, okay.
Minister, is it still the government's intention to destroy those heritage properties, St George's Terrace and
Willow Grove.
Willow Grove? Set piece answer.
The Powerhouse Parramatta project is underpinned by extensive architectural, heritage, geotechnical, engineering and flood risk studies. The government understands the importance of local heritage to the community, and the international design competition for Powerhouse Parramatta focused on developing concept designs to get the best outcome for the people of New South Wales. All finalist design teams in the Powerhouse Parramatta International Design Competition were asked to consider heritage and cultural significance within their submissions.
Minister, we've heard this answer
including
before.
local heritage buildings.
We've heard this answer
Potential
before.
design themes to explore outlined in the Stage 2 brief, including the history of the site's development over time, including Willow Grove and the St George's Terraces. Design teams were also asked to consider the City of Parramatta Council's aspiration to create a pedestrianised civic link from Parramatta train station to the Parramatta River. The submissions received made clear that it was not possible to deliver on the design ambitions of the brief and Council's aspirations for the Civic Link, while also retaining Willow Grove and St George's Terrace. While the retention of heritage was considered carefully during the judging process, the jury was unanimous, including Kim Crestani, the Parramatta City architect, a staff member of Parramatta Council. The jury was unanimous in its decision on the final chosen concept. On 1 July 2019, City of Parramatta Council wrote to Create New South Wales saying there was no need to prioritise any single objective, such as the delivery of Civic Link or retention of Willow Grove, as to do so may unduly constrain the delivery of a world-class museum. Council also expressed support for the planned jury process and, as I've just pointed out, had a member of its staff, its city architect, on that jury. The winning design reflects and will engage with the multiple histories of the site, including its Indigenous histories. The environmental impact statement seeks approval to demolish 2 local heritage items as required. As part of the environmental impact statement, Infrastructure New South Wales commissioned 3 independent and separate reports to assess the European and Aboriginal cultural heritage within the site of Powerhouse Parramatta and the surrounding areas. The 3 independent reports include Aboriginal Cultural Heritage Assessment Report done by Curio Projects, Draft Archaeological Research Design also done by Curio Projects, and a Statement of Heritage Impact done by Advisian. The cultural impact of demolishing the local heritage items will be mitigated through the implementation of heritage interpretation measures and on balance is outweighed by the significant positive cultural impacts associated with the delivery of a world-leading cultural institution that will make its own unique and important contribution to the cultural heritage of Parramatta, particularly through a major focus on highlighting First Nations culture, art, science and technology. Overall, the environmental impact statement identifies that the cumulative impact of heritage loss is minimal. The environmental impact statement recommends a detailed heritage interpretation plan be developed for the site with consideration of the City of Parramatta Council's Draft Heritage Interpretation Guidelines 2017. The Powerhouse Parramatta is uniquely placed to undertake programmatic interpretation and engage audiences with the multiple pre- and post-contact histories of the site. Heritage interpretation will continue during the operation of Powerhouse Parramatta through the ongoing commissioning of new works, cultural programs and community consultation.
I'm almost sorry I asked that question, Minister.
I am sorry you
I am
asked
sorry I asked. I mean, because we've heard that answer before. Is this going to now be subject to another political decision since the CFMEU have still got a green ban on the place, on those 2 historical properties? Well, I don't read another one out.
Government is aware that the New South Wales branch of the CFMEU has placed a green ban on the demolition of the Willow Grove and St George's Terrace buildings in Parramatta.
But Minister, what's changed?
South Wales Government will consider all submissions received during the public exhibition of its EIS, which closed on the 21st of July 2020. A response to submissions report will be prepared to respond to all matters raised, including concerns about heritage loss. The government understands the importance of local heritage to the community, and the international design competition for Powerhouse Parramatta focused on developing concept designs to deliver the best outcome for the people of New South Wales.
But Minister, it's not just the CFMEU that's calling for the retention of Willow Grove and St George's Terrace. The Heritage Council of New South Wales, in their submission to the planning process, required this from the EIS. Required the EIS to outline the process leading to the selection of the site and the siting of the new development in the context of the heritage items on the site, including any designs that could facilitate the retention of Willow Grove and the St George's Terrace.
And that's
Are you
what's
going
happened.
to? Are you
And that
providing?
is exactly what has happened.
Have you provided designs that will allow for the retention of Willow Grove and St George's Terrace, as the Heritage Council asked?
Well, one of the shortlisted designs did that, and the jury felt that it was a suboptimal outcome.
Minister, this is a requirement for the planning process, not the jury selection. This is a requirement for the planning process. The Heritage Council has said the planning process should consider any designs that could facilitate the retention of Willow Grove and St George's Terrace. So why isn't that part of the planning process?
Thank you. I'll take that on notice.
They also said this.
Can I ask a question? Sorry.
You sure?
Just on this, can I do one more on this? They also required the proponent to investigate the cumulative impact of the further loss of heritage within the Parramatta area from the point of view of the local communities. You haven't done that either. Why hasn't that been done?
I will take that on notice and get an answer for you.
Chair?
Yep, please.
Minister, I just wanted to go to part B of the terms of reference, which is the broader one talking about the government's management of all museums and cultural projects in New South Wales. And just wanted to raise the issue of COVID and its impact on arts and culture in this state, and what any ongoing plans that the government has to deal with it and address it, because obviously this sector's been hit probably more than any other.
So, Mr. Franklin, was your question just about state cultural institutions?
Well,
or about something else?
No, it was about it was predominantly about the impact of COVID on the arts and cultural sector in New South Wales, obviously with reference to the major institutions particularly.
Well, obviously, we acknowledge that there's been a profound impact across the state's cultural institutions, and indeed an arguably even more profound impact on the independent arts sector. We've been working very closely with the state's cultural institutions to provide support and minimise the impacts. Museums, galleries and libraries have been able to reopen from the 1st of June 2020, subject to public health guidelines. Just a second. Sorry about that. Theatres, concert halls and other live performance venues have been able to open from 1 July 2020, observing COVID safe plans and physical distancing. Create New South Wales has established a working party, Project Awake, to inform the sector on reopening. Project Awake has been working closely with cultural institutions and New South Wales Health to deliver reopening information to the rest of the arts and culture sector. I'm pleased that most of our cultural institutions are now open to the public and are following strict COVID-19 protocols to ensure the safety of staff and visitors, and that's a very good thing as well. I won't go into detail with all of the individual cultural institutions, although if there are any particular institutions that you're of interest to, I have information and am able to supply that to the committee today if necessary, or obviously it can be asked on notice. In terms of the independent arts sector, the New South Wales Government has announced a $50 million rescue and restart package for New South Wales arts and cultural organisations to ensure the sector continues to make an important contribution. It will ensure the survival of some of the most significant arts and cultural organisations. The package will be delivered in two stages, $25 million now, for organisations to temporarily close and ensure that they avoid financial crisis, and then $25 million in the coming months to enable organisations to restart operations after the COVID-19 pandemic. the funding's available to New South Wales not-for-profit arts and cultural organisations, and they're being assessed as being in financial distress across the state on a case-by-case basis. And that package is in addition to the $6.34 million interim package, which was announced on the 24th of April. A number of expenditures have been made as part of that, and I can go into some detail about that if you want to. The last thing I'd say is that Creative Kids was expanded to include digital programs, keeping kids creative during COVID-19, and that's been fantastic. And we also provided an extra $1 million to content $1 million to content providers to support their expansion of digital programs for kids during the COVID-19 period.
Thanks, Minister. And just one final question. When do you envisage the $25 million, the first tranche of the $25 million, the successful projects will be announced? It's a detailed process which involves working out exactly when the money is required to ensure a catastrophe for them, but not before they need it. So it's effectively a forensic accounting process rather than a grants process, if you know what I mean. Yep. So basically, the companies will be getting it as needed, obviously the horizon for independent organisations is worrying, but most of them are fine, certainly till the end of September, but it becomes more difficult when you start looking at the 30th of December. Yep. So progressively, we'll be making decisions about what the need is, but it's pretty much an objective process, not a subjective process, based on an accounting exercise. We're not saying they deserve it more than whoever needs it should be encouraged to get in the system, the Create New South Wales system, create all of the information they have and their concerns, and then Create does that forensic accounting exercise. They're assisted by some external experts. Then it's looked at by Treasury to confirm eligibility, and then it comes to the Minister to sign it off. Okay. So it's as simple as that. Thanks, Minister.
Minister, I just wanted to ask if you had completion dates for either one of the two projects.
So, yes, we did seem to overlook that in our enthusiasm to get on with exploring various aspects of the process, didn't we? The expected completion date that we're all working for at the moment for Parramatta is late 2024. The unknowns in those processes, two big unknowns that will affect that is, first of all, the SSDA process and how long that takes, and secondly, how long the procurement process takes to get the construction. So all being, well, to the extent that you can say anything is normal these days, but if they go as we would like them to go, 10 years. If they go as we would like them to go, then Powerhouse Parramatta will be open by the end of 2024.
And is there any date that you would like to have the new facility at Ultimo, whatever that is, up and running? Is there a date that you'd like to have that?
As soon as possible, but obviously that can't be assessed until we see what the outcome of the final business case is. The recommendations of the final business case. Until that goes through the standard infrastructure New South Wales assurance processes, and then after a decision is made by the Expenditure Review Committee. Correct.
There's been some discussion about the construction costs of Parramatta and some non-discussion of costs in relation to Ultimo. I wanted to ask about operational costs and what provisions have been made in relation to that, because now obviously the intention is to operate two museums and not one, and that's obviously a more significant undertaking for government going forward. So what is the intention in terms of the funding for the operational costs of the two museums?
You make a very valid point, and obviously that's a focus of the final business case as well, to look at the operational funds that will be needed to ensure that that MAS can operate across 4 sites. And I'm not sure that there'd be a lot that the Deputy Secretary could add now on that issue, but I'd invite her to make some comments if she'd like.
Thank you, Minister. We do have provision in the business case for Parramatta and Castle Hill for an operational recurrent expenditure. That's being finalised as part of our business case activities. We obviously with Ultimo, it is an operating museum at the moment, so we do have a baseline cost of what it takes. Now, the business case will need to take into consideration what would Ultimo look like in the future and what are the options around that, and then what is the budget demand on it. Obviously, we will do all we can to operate to respect the government's financial, fiscal considerations and operate effectively and efficiently.
Have they given you any footprint or blueprint in relation to those considerations? Have they told
Well, the considerations are part of the master planning. If I can say about Ultimo as well, Ms Jackson, if that's okay, we do also think about the master planning of the site as an input into the business case. So how does that work, and how does it, as the Minister said earlier, it is in a very important precinct. It's part of the Ultimo and Harris Street. We've got the light rail sitting behind it. We've got Darling Harbour on the other side. We've got a tech precinct in the central area and a major transport hub with Central Station, buses and light rail. So how do all of these things work together to support visitation to the powerhouse at Ultimo? The Minister indicated earlier that parts of the Harwood site are problematic for collections and storage, which is why Castle Hill is an incredibly important part of the program overall. So when those inputs are put together, that's what that and the master planning that is then goes into the business case to assess what the costs are, both from a capital point of view, from a recurrent point of view, understanding we already have a baseline because we have a museum there, both in the forward estimates process but also into the future. I note that the Ultimo Powerhouse continues to operate. At the moment with COVID, there are some constraints inside the museum. I'm sure Ms Havilah can talk about that this afternoon, but providing for the digitisation of the collection, which is also part of our overall program budget, is to digitise the collection, improve access to it. That is a cost within the program budget, but also managing the constraints at the site. So that was a very long-winded answer, but the inputs are part of the master planning that takes into consideration a precinct that will be part of a business case and assured through the INSW process.
So you're doing a master plan at the same time as you're doing the business case?
For the
Are they
site
happening
as an
concurrently? Are they happening concurrently?
You do. So you have a look at the site. It's not for the whole precinct, but for the whole area. It is for the powerhouse site. They become inputs into the options as part of the business planning process.
Now, Minister, there was a period where Ultimo was going to be closed, when it was closed. So what's happened to the exhibitions? I mean, there was a period where there was going to be no exhibitions. So what has the government or the people working at the museum, what are their plans in place for the exhibitions that weren't going to occur? Is there going to be empty? What's happening at the museum during the period where it was originally going to be closed and there would be no exhibitions?
Shouldn't we ask Ms Havilah that?
I don't understand the question.
I don't quite understand it either.
There has been no
I'd be very
planning
happy to take that question on
at the
notice.
Powerhouse Ultimo, because
I'm sorry, is this...
there has been no planning for new exhibitions, curatorial work done at Powerhouse Ultimo, because up until July 4, it was closing. So has there...
That's
not
quite
the
right.
case.
Well, it was originally closing, then it was remaining open for a period of time. The question is just simply, what's the plans for the powerhouse between now and whenever the business case / master plan are finalised?
Thank you, Rose and David.
I'll give an answer and then invite the Deputy Secretary to give any additional information she has. But look, bookable tours of the Heritage Core continue until the end of 2020. Linear, an exhibition which explores the significance of line and lineage within Indigenous narratives and practices, has also been extended until the end of 2020. Maton, Australia's guitar, which you may have seen some media coverage of in the last few days, has opened last week on the 25th of July and is scheduled to go to the 11th of October 2020. That's a retrospective of Australia's leading guitar manufacturer, and I'm delighted to see they've got a music-focused exhibition, because they've got a really great collection of musical instruments. And if honourable members have visited the Museum Discovery Centre at Castle Hill, they would have seen that. That's one of the things that the Museum Discovery Centre can do. You can go and see things like that in non-museum conditions. They also have, now I'll try my best with the pronunciation here, Ramin Rokni Herazadeh and Hessam Rahmanian. I prefer talking to doctors about something else that opened in March, which is also due to go through till the 1st of September 2020, which is an installation across themes of grief, the body and healing. And so there's some of the
Thank you, Minister. This is a very good
exhibitions that are open and are planning to go for some time yet, and that's always been the case. And I imagine now that we've taken the decision to keep the museum open, there will be further work done on that.
Can you give us any assurances about the future of the Wiggles exhibition, which, based on my personal experience, is one of the most popular at the Powerhouse Museum?
Well, then I'm sure if it's very popular that it'll be staying open for some time to come.
We'll hold you to that, Minister.
For a friend.
Minister, can you be clear as to what the future of the Harwood buildings are going to be?
I've been very clear, which is that it's a matter that's being looked at in the Ultimo final business case.
So that you really don't know at this stage whether they'll be retained or demolished or repurposed or...
No decision has been taken about that, but a variety of options will be looked at, including the option which was flagged back in April 2018, when the Premier and I announced that one of the options being looked at for the Ultimo site was the possibility of a 1,500-seat lyric theatre.
Several trustees quit.
Minister, we don't have much time left, but one of the primary and continuing concerns about the construction of the museum at Parramatta is the flooding concerns. I think you've just been handed the report from Molino Stewart. They are the leading consultants in floodplain risk management and planning. They have particular expertise on flood planning and flood risk issues in the Parramatta CBD and Parramatta River catchment. They're the company that's prepared most of the major flood policies and plans for Parramatta Council. These are the experts. And they, in light of the data that came from the 9 February floods, their report says that the museum site may experience, or is likely to experience, overland flood depths of up to 0.5 metres as frequently as once a year. And to put that in context, a flood height at 30 centimetres is considered enough to sweep people away. So the major flood experts say once a year could be inundated up to half a metre. What do you say to that?
Well, given that I haven't had time to read your document, I think the only appropriate thing in the circumstance is to take that part of your question on notice. I will say that we've been through this issue many, many times. The museum is being built above the 1 in 100 year flood level, which has been the guiding principle that Parramatta Council has always used in terms of the building of any building in the Parramatta CBD.
Indeed, Minister, I'd ask you to turn to page 28 of that report that I've just provided to you, because its primary conclusion is that that is a woefully inadequate assessment for this site, because it says, and I quote,
as I
the
said,
site itself
in
is at
any
risk
matter-
of flooding from floods more frequent than the 20-year average recurrent interval, and flooding as frequent as the 1-year average recurrent interval overland flows in Phillip Street and Dirrabarry Lane. And they say that the analysis under the one in 100 years is a dangerous
David,
basis to proceed.
I don't want to in any way impugn what I'm sure is a very
They are the experts, Minister.
a good quality company and the work they've done. I think the only fair thing for me to do in the circumstances is to take the question on notice.
Well, the other question I'd ask you to take on notice is this. These flood consultants also make it clear, because of the rapidity...
David, you made
Minister, I'll ask you to
it
take one further issue on
very
notice.
clear that you had limited time left. If you've got further questions, why don't you put them
Well,
all
no,
on
this is
notice?
one I want to put
'Cause
to you
that's-
directly.
That's all.
Minister, these flood consultants say that there is as little as 45 minutes notice for a major flood event in Parramatta, and that the only safe way to ensure that the public in the museum can be protected is if they shelter in place. And their conclusions say unambiguously that there are no plans, there are no safe places.
David apparently wants to use the
There are
rest of
no
his
safe
statement
places
by
to
making
shelter
a
in
political
place.
statement rather
There are
than-
no safe places
rather
to
than
shelter in
actually
place
ask
in
questions.
this museum, and that it's dangerous to proceed. I can't understand how you're proposing such a
question.
dangerous project.
I don't think it is, Trevor.
Minister, will you respond to that conclusion, that public safety conclusion in
Yes,
this
I'd be
report?
very happy to respond on notice.
Minister, it's been in the media, and I don't know how accurate it is, but it's been said there's been up to $45 million spent on various consultants and other people since this project started, and obviously there will be more spent, whether it's $45 million or more.
Another 5 million on the business.
Another 5 million, so
it's
maybe...
wrong.
Sorry?
The estimate is wrong, and I'll give you the
That
figures
is-
in
well-
just a
No, that's from papers tabled in the Legislative
No,
Council.
well, I'm sorry, but
Are the papers wrong from Treasury?
Well, let him answer.
He's got a document.
Since
I come back in here and people have lost their...
mid-2017,
I know. Everyone was perfectly polite before you returned.
Your fault, Trevor. Get out of here.
Off it is.
Where's that ball going?
You've had your chance and you left.
Okay, here we go.
oh, sorry, do we want the answer?
No, we do want the answer.
Since mid-2017, approximately 19.6 million has been spent on consultants by Infrastructure New South Wales, Create New South Wales and the Museum of Applied Arts and Sciences Trust for the development of Powerhouse Parramatta. This includes costs associated with the purchase of the site, the development of the Powerhouse Parramatta business case, running the international design competition, conducting the collection, digitisation and relocation, developing the design, navigating the statutory planning and conducting a substantial program of community consultation. Given the complexity of this project, the risks and community concerns expressed, it's been important to obtain strategic advice on different options. As with all complex infrastructure projects, consultants are engaged to provide the specialist advice needed to define and progress the project. This includes
Page 2. Thank you.
architectural design, engineering, acoustics, cost estimation, urban and statutory planning, economics and communications. The procurement of these consultants was consistent with government procurement processes.
But Minister, you've only given us...
$19.6
But Minister,
million.
that's the figure since 2017. And it may not be a decade, as Walt suggests,
It's
but
going
this
to
was
be a
first
decade.
announced in
Going to be
February
a decade.
2015. So can we have the full list from February 2015 onwards?
I'd be happy to take the question on notice.
And how
Thank you.
much of that money since 2015, when you're taking the
We've got
figure on
another 5
notice,
million now.
is now wasted
Have train
because
sheds at Circular
the
Quay was up this
specifications
lot.
of the policy have changed on July 4? How much of all of that work and millions of dollars
I think
that was
they'll
spent is now completely redundant?
Well, none of
Chase
it,
tram sheds.
So none of it.
But they are. They
None
have
of
a
it.
bill.
because it all assists
buildings, we
in
should say
helping us
Harwin
refine the
buildings, we
options
rename them
as we
and
go
they
forward.
get demolished.
Absolutely.
All righty. Any more questions? We've got 1 minute to go.
Well, I could ask a quick one. So what is the status of the 95 casual employees? Have all of their jobs been saved at the Ultimo site?
I'll have to ask the Deputy Secretary to either respond to that or take it on notice.
Deputy
I
Secretary,
haven't
what's
been briefed
happened
on that issue.
What's happened to the 95 staff, the casuals, who are
My understanding is they continue to be engaged in work, but I'm happy to get back to you with the detail on that.
Thank you.
And Minister, it is good news that the Powerhouse is staying at Ultimo. You should get a fresh ministerial portfolio once every 6 months.
That's right.
Who knows what will happen 24 hours?
To go through that.
Do it every 6 months.
I was going to say, you should come and go a bit more often. That way you'll get what you want. All right, thank you very much, Minister, for
There was
attending.
probably much champagne consumed on that
I note
Friday
that,
night for various reasons.
I note the committee.
They don't do that
I note you've
anymore.
taken a number of questions on notice. The committee has resolved that answers to questions taken on notice be returned within 21 days. The Secretariat will be in contact with you in relation to the questions you've taken on notice. Thank you very much for coming, and we may see you again.